Welcome, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Diana Biggs, CEO of Valour, your moderator for this topic of the next decade in crypto. As everyone here will be well aware, this is a space that moves forward at a breakneck speed. It only seems to be accelerating. It can be difficult to know what's going to happen in the next week, let alone the next decade. But we've got a fantastic panel to share their predictions with us today, who all come at the space from a unique, equally interesting vantage point. So welcome Max, CEO and founder of Lisk, Pete Townsend, who's recently named Managing Director of the Launchpool Web3 Techstars Accelerator, and James Hume, who leads institutional sales at Huobi. Max, let's kick off with you because you've been in this sector now for a decade already.
Nearly, yeah.
Lisk was launched in 2016. From that historical perspective, and also as a technologist yourself, what have been the key learnings for you, and what are you looking at going forward?
So I'm in crypto since 2012. I'm turning 30 this year, so it's like 1/3 of my life. I never did anything else. And Lisk I started in 2016, and my key learnings, I would say, are like people always in the beginning, looking the decade back, try to apply blockchain technology to existing industries. Like supply chain was this huge topic everyone talked about early on, and I think that's not really the way to go. So my key learning would be that in order to bring blockchain technology somewhere, you really have to disrupt existing industries and create new industries, like DeFi or GameFi. These basically disrupted existing industries and brought something new to the plate. It's very similar like when new interfaces pop up, like the internet or now blockchain, people always try to apply this technology to existing or to the status quo. Like with the early internet, you just had phone books like on websites, and people were scrolling through these phone books while they could also just, scroll through a book, you know? And it took like many decades to arrive at social media. And I think it will take for crypto also many, many years to just become more like crypto native, where all these use cases popping up starting to make sense. What I always hear is like NFTs don't make sense. Why should I pay so much for like a JPEG, you know? But I think as we're moving forward, like now in the 2020s, these different use cases which already exist today and the new ones coming start to merge and creating some kind of a ecosystem which is starting to make sense. So yeah, my key learning is let's find new industries, or you have to find new industries which make sense for blockchain, and not try to look into the old world and trying to apply it there.
Great. Pete, you came from traditional finance and increasingly working with fintech more broadly, and now crypto. How are you seeing that evolution as crypto now moves from niche to more center stage?
Yeah, it's a good point. Max made some very good points there on applying blockchain to things that it doesn't need to be applied to, right? And that's where this all came from for me. So going back to 2010 when I was still in banking, and I call myself now a reform banker, that the first 4 years of crypto, or first 5 years between 2009 and 2014, it was, you might have been aware, but you were dismissive, right? And you just look. When I learned about it, and when I eventually read the Bitcoin white paper in 2014, late for most in the room, but early for a reform banker, that I saw a brand new framework for the capital markets and financial services in front of my face, and you got very excited about blockchain. And seeing, and then later reading the ETH white paper and seeing the beginnings of DeFi in all of that, people got incredibly excited and tried to separate, like you're saying, Max, crypto from blockchain, right? And I was part of that, and drinking that Kool-Aid for a couple of years, and then around 2017, 2018, it was just some of the people I was working with that said, no, it's all kind of one and the same. And so that evolution and that mindset that I went through probably between 2014 and 2017. In the middle of that is when I left the banking world behind and became an early stage startup advisor and investor in fintech and digital assets. That there's still so many folks that are way behind that curve that just aren't seeing it yet. And that there are people that I speak to in Dublin, where I'm from, that are like, "Oh my God, Pete, you're in crypto. What's wrong with you?" And they still don't get it. And I've got my financial advisor, the guy that set me up with my independent pension fund, right? I wouldn't call him a wealth manager. Well, he is, but I won't name him by name. I joke with him every now and again, and it's like, dude, can I pay you in crypto for that? He's like, absolutely not, right? So, what I see kind of happening though is that I'd say in the last 3 years, especially in the last 18 months, and whether it was parallel to COVID or not, but the institutional interest going through the roof. Everyone and their sister now at the institutional level has some crypto investing unit, but the problem is they're trying to shoehorn crypto into these old school frameworks and old school asset management structures, which just kind of negates so many of the benefits of investing in digital assets. So, I'd say over the last 10 years, the last 12 years, it's so much has happened and so much has been done. It's been so much progress in crypto. There's so much more room to grow, but it's only going to get faster. It's only going to go quicker, and you've got to be able to take that pulse, get in there, do the deals, or else you're just going to be left behind.
Right, and this institutional interest in the last 18 months with COVID and continuing to accelerate. James, what are you seeing from that perspective?
I've been in the space for about 3 years or so in the exchange space for crypto, and I think we've seen all the way from kind of back in 2017, 18, that was essentially we just had retail versus HFT traders in the space. There was no kind of rounded participation, but in the past 2 years and even in the past 6 to 12 months, I think that's really changed, especially with ETPs like yourselves and different parts of the space is really growing. We've seen a much more rounded participation, and I think that in turn helps everything else grow as well. So you've seen that, and I think also to time with kind of what you said, Pete, the infrastructure about the traditional markets and everyone expecting crypto exchanges or crypto OTC desks, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's hard for those guys to come in and see what we do and go, well, this is miles away from how we expect things to be. But the infrastructure is now, I think, in 2017, when we had that big rise up to 20K, institutions came and had a look in and went, well, this looks good to us, there's loads of volume, but we don't have the infrastructure to trade it. Yeah. And us as an exchange, and especially there's prime brokers out there, lending desks as well, we're really seeing that space grow. And I think now, we're speaking with, there's tens of kind of $1 billion plus asset managers that we're speaking to now, and they're starting to get with the offerings we have, and we've got some stuff kind of in the works as well. There's Huobi Hong Kong Asset Management that we're working on, which is a more regulated business, and the infrastructure is starting to grow and actually get there now for these guys to come and play. Because I think as a hedge fund or a trader or any of the institutional guys in the space, they do want to get involved, but sometimes it's just a question of how they can actually come and play, essentially. Not the guys want to, but their compliance and legal teams would have sleepless nights if they tried to, they do want to, but yeah, there'd be legal teams out there or compliance teams that would just say flat out no. It's not a conversation. So I think that's the main theme that I've seen, and especially in the past, I think the guys the big hedge funds out there we've been speaking to for probably 2 years or so. It was Jan, Feb this year. All of a sudden, it was like all of those guys came back and said, right, the guys that said, no, we kind of like this, we kind of like the idea. Jan, Feb was the moment where they all went, yeah, we want to do this. How can we do it? In the past 6 to 9 months, there's been a lot of back and forth and a lot of due diligence questionnaires as well about how we can help these guys and really accommodate them on the platform. And we're starting to get to the point now in kind of September, October times that these big guys are here and they're starting to trade. And I think we'll continue to see that theme kind of continue.
Makes sense.
From there.
Fantastic. And arguably one of the biggest trends when we look towards the next decade that everyone is speaking about now is Web3 actually becoming a functional reality. And one would argue that this decentralized internet was always sort of the original dream of it. And now we're seeing that we have the building blocks and that it's coming more to life. Pete, in your new role with the Web3 Accelerator, what are you looking for ahead of that?
Yeah, it's all come together pretty well, and Launchpool with Techstars together, getting this accelerator together back probably about 4 or 5 months ago, where they started talking about it, bringing it all together in May, June timeframe, and then I just joined in the last couple of weeks. The real attraction there for me was that I've been in the space for the last 5-6 years, and I truly believe in it, and I want to see it grow, but I know that there's so much building still to be done, because we have this wonderful digital ecosystem of money and of assets that exists and is doing incredibly well, but we still have so much in traditional finance that needs to move ahead, right? And there are plenty of examples out there, like you're saying, James, of the institutions that have embraced this, but in building what's coming down the road, I see obviously crypto, DeFi, NFTs, blockchain itself, tokenization, all as building blocks of the future. Anyone out there read the book Ready Player One? Show of hands. Few folks. Okay. Takes place in the year 2044. It's this, call it utopian if you want, call it dystopian if you want. In that everyone is, there's this wonderful virtual reality metaverse called Oasis. And you wear these VR visors, you wear these haptic gloves, you could wear a haptic suit if you want, you have these treadmills that you can run around on, and you can completely forget all your problems and run away to Oasis, to the metaverse, and live your life inside there, all right? And that was the vision of this book. Now, the year 2044, it had been in existence for 5-10 years at that point in time, but society itself, war-torn, plague-ridden. We see a little bit of that over the last 18 months, a little bit, right? So I just read that book in the last few weeks, and I woke up at 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning when I had 25% of the book to go. I thought I'd just read it and fall back asleep. And I read it for 3 hours, right? And I finished the book. Wonderful. What is the point of me sharing that with you guys today? When I think about this accelerator in Web3, and I think about the type of companies that we want to bring in, Techstars is a founder-first accelerator. Techstars is a mentorship-led accelerator. Bringing together with Launchpool and bringing that Web3 component is the first chain-agnostic accelerator that Techstars are doing. And thinking about these building blocks of crypto and pulling that all together, we've got some of the examples out of Ready Player One. When you can earn these credits playing this game and bring that into the real world, okay, that is obviously crypto. We're seeing that already with Axie Infinity, but that's just a 2D game that you're playing, right? It's not an immersive experience. When you are in this Oasis metaverse and you are borrowing, 10K from a friend, or 10K from, say, a loan guild to buy this armor for your skins. Well, that's a little bit of DeFi and that's a little bit of NFT. Okay, all of this supported on a decentralized blockchain, tokenized platform. When you read that book and you see that vision, now I haven't seen the movie yet, it's a Spielberg movie, you kind of start to imagine all this stuff. And so when I see that, I'm thinking about this accelerator. Is it a gaming accelerator? Absolutely not. It's recognizing that we've got a lot to build to get to this future, and I think, are we going to try to prevent it from being a dystopian future? I think that's too much to ask at this stage for an accelerator in the year 2021. But taking that founder-first approach and saying, are these rock stars founders that can build fantastic businesses, and are they still humble and open for mentorship? Those are the two big things that we're looking for. Below that, in terms of the Web3 ideals, I could rattle off and say out of the 10 companies we're going to end up with, we're looking for 2 of this, 2 of this, 2 of this, and 2 of this. That would change the whole thing. It's about the process of selecting the founders. We're going to get in the applications. We're going to see some fantastic people, that we're going to look at, and I'm really excited about the mix of founders that we're going to end up with here, and bringing that all to Dublin in Ireland for the first time for Techstars as well.
Fantastic. And Max, as one of these potential building blocks elements, how are you seeing the Web3 shift with Lisk?
Yeah, I think you raised a very good point that there's still so much building which needs to be done. And that's why at Lisk we're building tools for developers to enable them to build blockchain applications. And it took us like 2-3 years to actually build our own blockchain. And now with the tools we developed out of that, it takes a developer just 1 hour to come up with their own blockchain and make a blockchain application out of that. And I think looking ahead, the developer and user experience will continue to become better and better. And the number of use cases will go up. Like you said, there are still so many different use cases just out of traditional finance which have to come into DeFi. But so are so many other areas which are still unexplored. So I think it's up to the developers to explore these unknown areas today. It doesn't stop at DeFi and GameFi. There will be so many new use cases popping up in the decade ahead. And talking about Ready Player One, and you mentioned bringing the digital world and back, or the crypto world back into the real world. I think going forward, the real world and the digital world will merge more together until the point where it becomes one, just a world. We see Apple moving, or at least that's a rumor since many years, moving heavily into AR in order to, well, enable people to enter this digital world while just walking around the city and so on. And I think like the youth nowadays, well, they don't buy maybe real estate so much anymore, which the people with the old money did. They're trying to find new innovative ways to invest and put their money in, and that's what I'm pretty excited about, like just new crazy ideas coming from these developers building and creating essentially a new world, the world we will see in 2044 or whenever, so it becomes a positive world and not a dystopian future. And yeah, for us at Lisk, it's all about just enabling developers to build use cases. Because I don't know actually where we're heading towards. Like 5-6 years ago, if I would be on this panel, I would have not said DeFi, GameFi. And we got announced here stating this is the most difficult panel of the day. I'm not like a magician, I cannot foresee what's coming. But what I can do is to put the necessary work into Lisk, or in general into what we're working on, in order to let these 12 or 15 million JavaScript developers out there, our tools are all written in JavaScript, to explore what's coming next. We believe that out of these experiments, real startups and use cases emerge, so that's what we are just trying to do. Let them experiment with blockchain technology in order to find what's coming ahead for crypto.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go for it.
Really interesting point that you brought up, and I'm thinking, do you think that the majority of the growth of the crypto space, of the digital space, is going to come from the natural organic growth of that as the global population increases, or will it be from the existing fiat traditional financial system bringing money into the crypto space? Or going to be organic, or this convergence and this transfer over?
Yeah, I think the most interesting use cases will be built by young people, like 16-year-olds, 20 years old, who still are trapped in the old world, but which for them crypto is normal. Crypto is like what they're doing, you know. They don't know anything else. Their thought processes are not trapped in old ideas. And I think innovation will mainly come from these kind of people, and then the older people will try to, well, adopt and get used to it, but, well, with a slower pace. Like when Facebook came around, like the young people were jumping on it. The students were the first adopters. And then slowly but surely, like the older people joined it as well, like our mothers and fathers, and then the young people already moved on. And I think with crypto it will be similar that, well, younger people will build it, will adopt it, older people then will try to join it, and then by the time the older people join, the young people already moved ahead. And you said we're just accelerating everything. Everything is just going quicker and quicker. And I think that's where everyone will have a problem going forward to just adopt these new things, because the day after, something new is already happening. But I think that's also where we are focusing more going forward on communities, where these communities stay together and, well, innovate within their own community. Like NFT is essentially a community. If you go to crypto Twitter and follow these NFT collectors, they have their own terminology even. Like GM, good morning, or friends. Like, it's a community and it's something people want to be part of. Yeah, and that's also something very interesting. But I think younger people will innovate.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
But on a counterpoint there, what we are seeing with the institutionals, with TradFi and others, is that now they're starting to move away from just holding maybe some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, and to actually waking up to this broader movement of DeFi and the possibilities that are out there. And it's becoming increasingly more of a risk to not do anything in the space. But in terms of that infrastructure, similar to what we saw with fintech, we moved from this idea of these traditional institutions being completely disrupted to actually them understanding that they will need to collaborate because they do not have the internal teams or skill sets to actually build out their own infrastructure. So rather than potentially using existing DeFi protocols as a layer that they will then build their applications on top of. Is that something you might be seeing a shift towards at Huobi with your institutional clients?
Yeah, I think we see a few different things. I think I'll circle back just to what Pete said earlier. We definitely see a lot of rock stars that are building. I think building. Obviously, I think something like 40 or 50% of the space are quant traders in terms of the trading side of things, and a lot of those are naturally devs. So I've seen have a lot of people from that are devs and quant traders or hedge funds with us that all of a sudden have seen DeFi not just as an opportunity to go and trade and see opportunity there, but to actually go and build something, as Max, I'm sure you're tied into well. And at Huobi, I think our kind of main involvement in the DeFi space, I think at the moment is VC. So we've actually just set up a 10 million gamified fund, and we do a lot of, I think we've got 3 or 4 other VC teams. So it's kind of, we try and help, probably similar to the way you do to a lot of the DeFi guys out there, and kind of assist and push forward the space. Because I think at the end of it, a lot of what we're involved in, we're kind of at the center in the sense we see the retail flow, and obviously the retail want to see a lot more stuff in DeFi. And yeah, we definitely see a lot of the rockstar teams and developers that are really building some great projects, and I think that's just going to continue.
Yeah.
As more people, I think a lot more people are flowing into the space now, whether it be the trading side of things or DeFi, because the opportunity there is so big. It's big enough for now, the guys that will come out of Facebook, Google, to really push the space forward. And we've definitely seen a lot more sophisticated and real top talent enter the space, especially in the DeFi or the Web 3.0 world.
Yeah, what I'm eager to see is, speaking of rock stars, like the Collison brothers, who are from Ireland, John and Patrick, who are Stripe, right? And that I kind of hold up, from a fintech perspective and think about bridging into crypto, I hold up Stripe and Square, right? Square are clearly already there, okay? And Square have this wonderful thing called the flywheel, which I won't get into because it gets me very excited, and it's way off topic. But Square, I think, are bridging that gap between small businesses, individuals, and introducing crypto into that. I want to see what Stripe are doing, because Stripe they've come up that value chain from the smaller businesses into the bigger businesses. And what are they going to do in the crypto space in order to bridge that gap over into the institutions? I think, the point of saying that there's so much wealth out there right now that we could bring into this space, and just keep fueling the innovation and fueling the fantastic entrepreneurs that are building in this space, and fueling the 16-year-olds, like you're saying, that are coming up with these ideas that no one's thought of yet. I got very excited about this concept of dynamic NFTs, where I can buy the entire Boston Red Sox digital collectible NFT set, and that when they win the game, and for the 24 hours between the win and then they play again, and they might lose the next game, that the picture of them on that digital collectible card, just from them just sitting there with a bat in their hand, and them having their hands up like, yay, we won, right? And being able to see those types of things happening. I don't know if a 16-year-old kid in Boston might come up with that idea, right? But enabling all of this fiat wealth to come into this space, I think, is a good thing. Now, with that brings this little R word called regulation, obviously, that we got to be careful of, because there's a lot coming down that path as well.
Yeah, very difficult to look at the decade ahead without at least putting some consideration into the regulation and the implications that has, not only for the applications that we're going to be seeing, but also how different geographies fare depending on what their scope of what they're able to do.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on. Obviously, a lot of, I think, thinking about the EU and thinking about the progressive regulatory mindset that has been here in the EU, because the kind of the cross-cultural dynamic and different ideas, different mindsets feeding this regulatory approach, and seeing markets and crypto assets start to unfold. Still a lot of work to do there with Mika, or there's one other pronunciation of that I don't get. That's coming in the year 2024. That's talking about stable coins being more equivalent to e-money. There's already an e-money institution regime in place. Looking at the US and seeing the big investigation they're doing now into stable coins with subpoenaing, doing the subpoena. The SEC subpoenaed Circle, who are the issuer of USDC, to do some investigation into them, and they're probably the best governed stablecoin issuer out there. If I were a betting man, which I am sometimes, I would say that in the US, if there was an e-money institution regime, they'd be in a much better position right now, because e-money and the regulatory concept of that in Europe is very close to stablecoins from a USDC definition, okay, which is close to 100% reserve of cash. And I'd like to see over the coming years the US do this the right way. And to me, I think the US doing this the right way is the same as how Ireland created its investment funds industry in the 90s. The way they did that, State Street, Bank of New York, AIB in Ireland all got together with the financial regulator in Ireland and said, here's how you regulate investment funds. And they built this fantastic regime that's now worth $4 or $5 trillion. I think we need that collaborative approach where industry puts forward its own and says, if we're going to regulate this, this is how we do it and present it, because it's coming. And if there's this opportunity to bring all this institutional wealth into this space, I think that there is a libertarian streak in me for being part of this for the last few years, but I think it's part and parcel with bringing in massive amounts of global wealth into this space.
Absolutely. And James, as an exchange coming out of Asia, how is regulation playing a role in your global growth?
I mean, it's huge. I think it's hard not to talk about, as you said earlier. I mean, we started, 8 years ago? We're just on our 8th year anniversary now, and we operate in over 170 countries. So you can imagine the operation it takes to even just stay afloat or just realize what's going on in each one of those regions. So yeah, it's huge, and not a lot of people know this, but Huobi have also a lot of regulated businesses. So I think we've got 6 or 7 different regulated entities, whether they be asset managers, OTC desks, and a few other different things like trust companies for HUSD, for instance. But definitely a big part of our plans going forward, and I think it shows in what we've done in the past few years specifically. We've really pushed forward on our Huobi HK platform, which now has, similar to yourself, obviously Lisk ETPs. So we want to be able to go to the big institutional clients and not just sell them the kind of spot and derivatives main venue, but we want to be able to have participation from the people that come into the space and say, hey, we want to trade, but we can't come and do this, but we want some exposure to Bitcoin. So, for instance, we've got BTC products, these products similar to that of Grayscale. We've also got a multi-asset product and also an actively managed fund, which is obviously looks a lot more similar to traditional, and it is that kind of step into the market, and it can open doors for us and have the initial chats where we can kind of educate the institutions. I think what I've definitely found in the last 2 years or so is a lot of the institutions want to come into this space, and they kind of come in and say, hey, we want to trade, but how do we do it? What's going to fit our kind of trading style? What's going to fit the way we want to invest? And some of it's just education. It takes time. We're starting to kind of get there now, especially on some of the bigger guys, and especially more of the kind of big buy-side guys that come into the space. And the Huobi HK kind of gives us the opportunity to speak to them at the beginning and kind of give them an idea of how this stuff works. Because as much as crypto sometimes can look a bit like traditional in the way the infrastructure's been built, obviously a lot of it kind of comes from whether it be FX or derivatives space, and everyone's tried to remodel different things and work them into crypto. But yeah, I think we've done a good job of kind of putting Huobi HK together and trying to get to the institutions first, and then kind of educating them on the more quirky, let's say, kind of crypto native exchange side of things, if that makes sense.
I'm with you.
And Max, does regulation affect your outlook with Lisk?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's our favorite topic, I guess.
I know.
For me, regulation is a necessary evil, but important and necessary, but evil. Like when we started Lisk, we had to go to Switzerland because in the whole world it wasn't possible to establish a crypto entity which did an ICO. And then we did it like the Ethereum way in Switzerland as a foundation. And since then, obviously, many things changed. Jurisdictions started to think about crypto, adopted new regulations like MiCA, for example, in Europe. And with the foundation and our lawyers, we are part of the working groups and contributing to regulation, but from a crypto perspective, not from a traditional law or finance perspective. We're trying to make the regulations as easy and good as possible for entrepreneurs, because we are enabling developers or entrepreneurs to build something. And I think regulation always puts like a wall between an innovative idea and the execution of it. So I'm not a big fan, but speaking about regulation, I think the only way forward, because we're talking about how everything is accelerating in this world, and you will see innovation on a daily basis going forward. I think the only sustainable way going forward is radical decentralization. So that means a smart contract doesn't necessarily have an entity behind it. It's just a smart contract. It's just code living on the blockchain which can be executed by other people. And if there's no entity behind it, maybe even no team behind it, just anonymous characters, then there's no one to lock away. You know, like I had a podcast interview a few weeks back, I think, with Crypto101, and he essentially said to me, "Well, you did something very dangerous because you don't know now or in 10 years you can still be locked away for what you did in 2016." And like looking at the decade ahead, maybe for some entrepreneurs, they want to stay anonymous and they just want to embrace this radical decentralization in order to not bother with the regulation. Their token is tradable on a DEX. Their app or their use case is living as a smart contract on, for example, Ethereum, and they get maybe a fee or revenue through the blockchain protocol somehow. And I think that would be the only sustainable way going forward, unless you want to open that very difficult Pandora box of regulation and staying compliant, because it's a lot of work. Like, we are putting a lot of work into staying compliant, and I have to say it harmed us in execution speed in the past years.
Yeah.
There's always something new around the corner, always something you have to take care of. We're being audited like a bank every year. We have to do quarterly audits of our code base and of our deliveries. And so much work which is essentially not necessary because no one checks it anyways. We do all these things, but they don't really check. They just see the result and all fine, but it's not any advantage to the jurisdiction, to the government, to us. So I'm more like about open regulation or no regulation at all, and let the space regulate itself. That would be my statement to that.
Yeah, I hear you. And you can't, like you said, it's trust the code, not the institution, right? And that, I think the crux of this is going to be, is the growth going to come from just this natural, organic growth of the crypto space and the changing tides of the population and the demographic split of the population? And will that just create this tipping point where the digital asset ecosystem just becomes money, and how we spend money, how we save, how we invest, how we insure? I think that is the big question. Or will that happen, but we're also going to have this wave of conversion? And it's that wave of conversion of letting go of these old ideals about how you regulate money, whether that's fiat or it's crypto. I think that demographic, and whether it be a conversion or organic growth, I think is going to make the difference.
Yeah. I mean, like, I talked about 16-year-olds going to innovate. They don't want to bother with legal questions.
No.
And I think, like, just because things are going to change so rapidly, no one will be behind the fact anymore. And we will see, I think, a true explosion of use cases going forward. And everything is a little bit different. Like I think with smart contracts you can do so much. That's a whole other topics. But let's just start with consensus algorithms of different blockchains. Like, for example, proof of stake or delegate proof of stake. No proof of stake protocol is the same. There are small differences, and they can make a huge difference in staying compliant or not. And like, you could do a legal opinion on it and try to secure yourself with it. But no regulator is going to understand all these different proof-stake protocol differences. So you cannot stay legal. You can just protect yourself as good as possible and hope for the best. That's where I think everyone here in the room who is an entrepreneur or developer, please embrace radical decentralization and just innovate as fast as possible, because I think the world needs it.
And certainly anyone in the room who comes from traditional finance will be well aware of the effect that having more efficient regulation and compliance management would just have on the speed and the pace of innovation and what anyone is able to do. So that will definitely be a major turning point for the space to move forward. I think we have time to take maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. If anyone wanted to ask this oracle from the future about the next decade. Quiet bunch. No questions. Oh, we got one there. Oh, and there.
Hi there. So one of the ideas I heard about earlier was the idea that transaction per second will increase and increase over time, almost like transaction TPS is the new bandwidth. So as bandwidth in the internet increased, we got new use cases. Same thing for blockchain. What type of use cases do you think you could see with just astronomically increased transaction per second? Ask that to anyone.
Yeah, maybe me from a tech standpoint, I would be careful with that statement that TPS are going to increase easily, because there are certain limitations in place you cannot work around. It is decentralized. So if you increase your TPS, it's going to be less decentralized because, well, peer-to-peer works in a certain way, and at one point you cannot make it more efficient. So we're seeing like new blockchain projects actually sacrificing decentralization for speed. Solana probably one of the best examples, or EOS. With Lisk, we go a middle way. We're not that decentralized like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but also therefore not that slow like them. But obviously, it is going to play an important role going forward with use cases. However, you have to always keep in mind that the blockchain is just a ledger for very important information. So we're not going to see people storing like, let's say, entire books or movies or whatever on the blockchain. It's always about small hashes, for example. So the only thing what an increase in TPS, in my opinion, will do is to decrease the fees you need to spend on that blockchain. Because like if you have like 100 TPS or 50 TPS or 1000 TPS, new use cases might not really emerge out of that, but it's just going to be cheaper to use your blockchain application. That's what I think.
Okay, super fast. We've got 40 seconds. Could I just get from each of you, what are you most excited for in the decade ahead? James.
I think I'm going to have to be quite boring here and go for the institutional answer. But I think the infrastructure and the adoption side of things, we've still not got a prime broker in the institutional space. So I think it'll be interesting to see who the winners are. So I think that's one side of things. I think also just to come from the retail adoption side as well, I think NFTs, if we don't mention NFTs, someone's going to get angry in the room. So
no, great. That's great.
I want my dynamic NFTs, like I said, for the Boston Red Sox, but I think we're going to see in the next 10 years what I'm excited about is I'm going to predict a major U.S. stock exchange shutting down because everyone's delisted and moved to a DEX.
Awesome.
And I'm the most excited about just seeing more users of blockchain technology and blockchain applications and less investors. I think this technology is amazing and should be used going forward.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.